An event in London a number of years ago, about 900 people in the audience. I asked all 900, I started with my presentation by saying, how many of you are here hoping to, maybe just possibly sell something? 900 people raised their hands. I mean, the entire room. I said, great. How many of you are here hoping to, maybe just possibly buy something? No one raised their hand. Not one single person. This is what I call the networking disconnect. People show up at networking events wanting to sell, but nobody's there to buy. If your network is a mile wide and an inch deep, it'll never be very strong. So you need a network that is both wide and deep. You can refer each other, because that's the key, is passing referrals. We're on the world's largest networking organization. I'm an extrovert. It's like, okay.
I'm ecstatic to introduce Ivan Misner. Now, Ivan not only is the founder of BNI, actually the largest networking group in the world with over 220,000 members. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, my pleasure to be on.
I'd really love for the people that are out there listening going, what is this BNI thing? Just to, if you could share just a little bit about what BNI is and how it really has helped the world economy of small businesses.
So BNI is a business and professional networking organization. We allow one person per professional classification to join. We get together every week, so we literally have 8,100 meetings every week all around the world. We get together to pass each other referrals. Last year we passed 9.9 million referrals.
So just a couple.
Yeah. Generated 11.1 billion US dollars worth of business for our members. Now, just so you know, 11.1 billion is the same as the gross domestic product for the country of Liechtenstein.
Wow.
Okay, it's a small country, I know.
Yeah,
but still, how cool is that we
is
as a business organization could actually generate as much business for us as a small nation in the world. I'm looking for a bigger nation next year, but I still think it's amazing.
You recently did a survey in regards to some of the characteristics that are required to be a successful networker, or what is seen in high esteem when you're networking. And I think I'd love for you to share that detail first.
So let's start with the characteristics of the top networkers. Now, what I did was I did a survey. It was open to the public. I had 3,400 responses. It wasn't just a BNI survey. People from all over the world, from many different organizations took it. And so we took a look at what were the top characteristics of a great networker, and then what were the bottom characteristics of a networker. And so the top 7 characteristics, here are the top 7 characteristics of a great networker. First was a good listener. And so that doesn't surprise me at all. A good networker has 2 ears and 1 mouth, uses them both proportionately. So that was number 1. Number 2 was a positive attitude. Now, that could go for introverts or extroverts, but positive attitude was really important. Sometimes it's really funny if you're out networking and you meet somebody, they start complaining about the economy, about business, whatever. Don't complain to people about business. Half the people you tell don't care, and the other half are glad you're worse off than they are. So, you got to have a positive attitude. Collaboration was the third one, and that's often something considered with building relationships, more introvert than extrovert like. Collaboration was number 3. Number 4 was being sincere and authentic. And oftentimes extroverts are viewed as, maybe a little insincere in the way they approach. So most of these are not extrovert related. Trustworthy, follow up, approachable. These were all the top characteristics of a great networker. But the next set is what's really interesting. And these are the bottom characteristics of a networker. The first 4 are all absolutely extrovert related. First is fearless or confident. Fearless and confident, man, that's extrovert all the way. Next is asking for the sale. And of course, what do we teach in sales? You've got to ask for the sale. But when it comes to networking, if you do it too early, it doesn't go over well. Next is a self-promoter. That's total extrovert. The next is being very direct, really direct. So 4 out of the bottom 5 characteristics are all extrovert related.
really interesting because what people would assume they need to, the characteristics they need to have to be successful in networking are actually, if they learn those skills, they'll be less successful.
That's correct. And I think here's the reason for it. I did another book with a survey of 12,000 people. The book was called Business Networking and Sex, Not What You Think. It was about the difference between men and women and how they network. And in that book, we discovered from the survey of 12,000 people, the people who were more relational in the way they networked were more successful than those who were transactional in the way they networked. By the way, women tend to be more relational. Based on this survey of 12,000 people, they tend to be more relational than men. Men tend to be a little bit more transactional than women. But when we took gender out of it and we just looked at relational versus transactional, the men and women who were relational did better. And so these survey results kind of make sense then because it's the introvert approach tends to be more relational. Let me add one thing though. The dead last number was social media savvy, which of course could be introvert or extrovert, but that was last. So people, 3,400 people around the world said social media savvy is just not that important with networking. Now I thought clearly millennials had to feel different about this. Yeah. So I pulled millennials, I extracted millennials out of the data. And I looked at just millennials and what they said were the bottom 5 characteristics. And I was right. They did not rank it last. They ranked it second to last.
Big difference there.
Second to last. So even millennials realize that social media savvy is not critical. And the other 4 were the same, by the way. They were the same 5.
Well, I think that what's interesting there is that introverts would naturally assume that they have to have these competencies to be successful, and they're all trying to be more extroverted in their networking. Yet it's actually the introverted qualities that are going to lead to that long-term relationship. Right. And it's funny, so I had on the show Jeffrey Eisenberg, and he's a classic introvert. His brother is a classic extrovert. And they talk about the conversation around how his brother has lots and lots of relationships. As you talked about in the first segment, a very wide network, but not very deep. Right. Where Jeffrey tends to have a very deep network, but not as many people. Yeah. So I think that, and I've sort of noticed this in my own networking, when I learned how to sell, I would try to be more extroverted and I'd be very promotional. And as soon as I swapped from being promotional to having a meeting of the minds conversation and offering value and trying to help.
Relational.
Relational, correct. Everything changed. And that was, for me, one of the big turning points in my networking. But the hardest thing, if I'm going to a networking event and I'm an introvert, I know that I'm going to be successful because of the statistics. I know I'm going to be successful when I'm talking to somebody. And I know that that's going to lead. And I know that a networking event is more about developing that relationship now than selling them on the day. Right. But I still got to start that conversation, and that's terrifying.
Right. So let me give you 2 or 3 examples of what to do. First of all, when you walk into a room, look for what I call open 2s, open 3s, and open groups. So a closed 2 would be 2 people standing face to face like this, okay? And it's very hard to break into that conversation. So, if you have the God view, right, you're looking down, they're like this. But an open 2 would be people, standing like this. So look for open 2s, look for open 3s. A closed 3 would be like a triangle, but an open 3 would be like a U shape. So look for open groups. It's really easy to just kind of slide on in. It's almost easier to slide into a group of people than it is for an introvert to walk up to one person and say, "Hi, my name's Ivan." It's easier to kind of slide in silently to a group of people. So look for the open 3s, open 4s, open groups. If you're running a network, I try to train my BNI members. If you're running a network, always have open stances. When a visitor comes into that group, always have open stances so that a visitor feels welcome. It's so easy to kind of strike up a conversation. That's 1. 2, whenever possible, go to an event with somebody who's a member or who knows a lot of people there and ask them, would you be kind enough to introduce me around? I'm uncomfortable meeting, just be honest, I'm uncomfortable meeting people. Would you mind introducing me around? Now, and it's great to go to an extrovert to do that, because they'll love to do that. They're a connector, and so they'll connect you with many people. And just be honest with them and say, I'm a little uncomfortable, but I really want to meet people. Maybe you wouldn't mind making introductions, and just have them go around and introduce yourself. Now, of course, introverts probably get this naturally, but remember, when you're meeting people, it's way more important to be interested than interesting. So you don't have to try to be interesting, be interested. And so there's three steps to consider when you're going into a network of people you don't know.
That's really great information. When I'm going up to this group of three though, or group of two, I can imagine what I'd be feeling at that point, and for me, I'd be feeling anxious.
Yeah.
I'm going up to talk to that group of two or group of three, and I'm going to be thinking I need to have something amazing to say, or I need to start, laughing at somebody's joke, or I need to somehow engage with that group. What would you suggest the easiest way to start to be involved in that dialogue, as opposed to being just a passive observer, would be?
Well, you have to be comfortable with whatever you're going to say. So if my suggestion doesn't work for you, that's fine. But for me, I would keep it very casual. Hi guys, my name's Ivan. Tell me about what you do. And then get them to talk.
So be interested.
Be interested. That's exactly it.
I think that's really important, because I think that too many people are so focused on saying something interesting, as you said,
Right.
as opposed to just trying to ask about them. I mean, they're all at networking events, right? And they want people to ask them about themselves.
Yes, they do. And if you're dealing with somebody who's good at networking, after they've talked about themselves, they're going to ask you, so tell me what you do. And then it's okay to be interesting, but first be interested. In being interesting, I recommend that you do a concept that's been around for a long time, a unique selling proposition. You want to say something that really gets people's attention. There's a company that I'm associated with called Ascentive, which has a great line. We help people create referrals for life, and then watch their eyebrow. Sam Horn, a good friend of mine who wrote a book called Pop, calls this the eyebrow test. When you use your unique selling proposition, their full unique selling proposition is we help people make more, work less, and create referrals for life. Then watch their eyebrows. If their eyebrows go up, just got their attention. They're like, oh, how do you do that? If their eyebrows go down, you just confuse them. Oh, how do you do that? Same words. Oh, how do you do that? But if the eyebrows go down, you lost them. If the eyebrows go up, you got them. So use a unique selling proposition. Practice, use different techniques or different phrases. And when you find one that generally passes the eyebrow test, gets their attention, and they ask for more information, that's a great phrase to use.
I think that's one of the key factors for a lot of people, because I know my mother used to introduce herself as a business coach. Yeah. And a lot of times that put her on a defensive position. Yeah. And what I noticed with the sales proposition that you just suggested, it didn't talk about the functional element of what they do. It talked about the outcome that they helped provide. Right. And I think I've spent a lot of time working with people and helping them understand how to get themselves from explaining I'm a videographer to I'm a narrative strategist, or I'm a ghostwriter to I'm an authority architect, because the goal is to excite and inspire people to want to know more, right, not put you in that defensive position. Do you have any advice for how people, in BNI they talk about the infomercial, the little 15-second what I do. Do you have any suggestions for how people should go about trying to create that?
So if it's a one-time thing where you're meeting someone, you're not meeting them regularly, you absolutely have to focus on the outcomes, as opposed to, I'm a business coach. You want to focus on something catchy that I help people generate 50% more business, or whatever the data is that you've got. That kind of is an attention getter. Now, on the other hand, if you're going to a meeting on a weekly basis or a regular basis like BNI, it's a little different. There, it's all about educating people. You're not trying to make a sale, you're trying to train a sales force. So you go every week in groups like BNI, and you want people to refer you. That's what it's all about. So how do you get them to do that? You have to teach them what you do. And so each and every week is about breaking your business down to their least or lowest common denominator. One little sliver of what you do. And spend your time, usually you only have a minute or so, spend your time talking about that one little sliver. So that over the course of a year, you've given a lot of content for someone about what you do, so that when they are out there in the field, they go, you know what, I know somebody who does that. So on a weekly basis, specific is terrific when you're doing a presentation to a group. When you're just talking to one person, then it's about outcomes.
That's brilliant. I think that's great advice. Well, Ivan, you've given us so much today, and I really appreciate you being so open with, talking about your introversion and talking about the systems and I guess the unique way that you found out about being an introvert. I think that offers a lot of value to people, because a lot of people get defined by their introversion, and I feel that it should be an empowering thing. I think you made it very clear that extroverts and introverts both have their disadvantages,
yes.
both have their strengths.
Yes.
And I'd like to say a lot of extroverts would consider that they have a specific edge, a thing that makes them uniquely able to do business and be successful in it. Yeah. I think introverts have that as well. And one of the things that I give all people pre-warning with is, I'm going to ask you what you consider your introvert's edge. And I'd love it if you would share, of all the things that you've accomplished, what do you think's been your real introvert's edge that's really got you to where you are today?
So I really believe that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating relationships. For me, hands down, it's about collaboration. That I have learned to collaborate with people rather than tell people what to do. And through that collaboration, I have worked with many people to create communities all around the world. Almost 250,000 members worldwide, all collaborating, all to build business for each other. That is, without a doubt, my introverted edge.
That's unbelievable. And thank you for sharing that. Well, I know you were sharing off camera some of the stories about moving into other countries and really the struggles and the successes that you had when doing that. And I'd love for you to share that, because a lot of people that are watching this show, they may be working for a corporation trying to get buy-in from people, or they may be dealing with other countries, or maybe they're starting their own business. And I think that story would add some really great context.
So I think sometimes we look at the differences in people as opposed to the similarities. And entrepreneurs worldwide want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And that's consistent in any entrepreneurial nation. And that was something that we tapped into in BNI. But you can't argue with the cultural differences, because there are cultural differences. So as we opened up in other countries, the first thing that people looked at was, oh, this is so American. This is so American. And today I tell people, this is the least American thing I've ever done. And they're like, how could that be? Well, when you think of American business, do you think of cooperation, collaboration, giver's gain, our core principle, core value? Giver's gain. No, you don't think of that when you think of America. You think of dog eat dog, I'm going to put that guy out of business. That's what you think about. And so this is the least American thing that I've ever done. Yet businesses, as we open in other countries, just assume that this is American. And rather than argue with those countries, we decided to embrace that. And so from the very beginning, as a matter of fact, the first country we did this in was Australia, where we changed just the spelling of words, like check with C-H-E-C-K in the US to C-H-E-C-Q-U-E in Queen's English. And instead of saying good morning everyone, it was good day mate or whatever. And we ended up making 450 changes in our manual. So the first day of the new chapter, after there was a lot of resistance that were different down under, we showed them the new manual, and we said, yeah, this was started in America, but we made 450 changes to the system. And the members looked at it and were like, yeah, mate, this will work great here in Australia. So rather than fight it, we just sort of embrace it, show them the program. What we found is that entrepreneurs worldwide want to do business with people that they trust. And if we can get to that, then it transcends the cultural differences.
I think that's amazing. And when I was doing my research on BNI, because my personal story with BNI is that my mother was a struggling introvert. She was a business coach, and she moved out of a big corporate organization, and she decided that being a business coach would be what she wanted to do for the next chapter of her life. And she then found she had to sell and she had to market, and a lot of people with functional skills, it's just not what they're built for. They assume that if they're just good at what they do, customers will come. Build it and they'll come. And that mindset, she discovered very quickly, just isn't the case. Yeah. and she needed to find a solution. So she joined BNI, and at that stage, we didn't really know what BNI was. And she started going on these dance cards with people,
Yeah.
which, you know, it's really an interesting kind of idea. But for her, that was the success for her business. She really struggled with going out and marketing. Networking events were not her thing.
Right.
So going in and talking about what she did, she found she'd say she was a business coach, and while these days I would tell her to say something different,
Yeah.
that she found that she was in a defensive, or people go, oh yeah, and I had a big business coach before and it didn't work.
Right.
Where BNI actually got her to be able to share what she did and then be able to have real conversations with people that referred her. And it really changed everything for her. She went from really struggling to, I can say the reason why I went to private school the last 2 years was because of BNI. And the change in my life was huge because of what my mother was doing, and the change in her confidence was amazing. Just by having a place to go where there were motivated people to help her. So for that, I really thank you for setting that up.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. It's amazing to me how it's changed so many people's lives by generating business and relationships. Now, you mentioned a dance card, just for clarity.
Yeah.
We're talking about one-to-one meetings where you sit down and actually meet with somebody, generally go through something I call the GAINS exchange, which stands for goals, accomplishments, interests, networks, and skills. And what you do is you try to look for overlapping areas of interest, because if you can find overlapping areas of interest, that's the beginning of building a relationship. If your network is a mile wide and an inch deep, it'll never be very strong. So you need a network that is both wide and deep, and those one-to-ones, those dance cards, are about going deep and building a professional relationship so you can refer each other, because that's the key, is passing referrals.
I think that makes such a difference, because I've been to so many associations where everybody talks about getting better at their skill, but no one knows what each other do. And it's like in the group, people are constantly complaining that no one's ever referring each other, and why is there not that kinship? And every time I'm like the odd one out that says, well, no one knows what each other do.
Right.
Why don't we have
How can
a
we do it?
session where we just share what each other do, or maybe we meet each other one-on-one? And that came from the understanding of BNI. And I think that, you know, my mother received a huge amount of business, but she also gave a huge amount of business because she met with graphic designers that didn't business coach, and she met with, you know, architects that didn't business coach. So the referrals she was giving, they weren't losing her anything. As a matter of fact, they were aiding her because she helped those people find solutions to people that they trust. And it's funny that that transaction. People see that if I give somebody else a lead, then I'm not making money. And it definitely wasn't the case. But not only that, people don't see that they're forwarding that relationship with the person that they're giving the introduction to, because people are like, oh, that's my go-to person for introductions.
It's really about building social capital. And in order to build social capital, you have to make an investment. And social capital actually is a little similar to financial capital. You know, the bank has this expectation that before you write a check, you actually put some money into the bank. Well, what happens is we try to write a check on a social relationship. We ask for something before we invest. And so by giving people a referral, you're investing in that relationship. And so it's easier later to ask for a withdrawal, to ask for help. But first, it helps if you put something into the relationship. You know, if I can just say one other thing, I think what happens in too many networking situations is that people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, Matthew, my name's Ivan, let's do business. And they go straight to doing business. I did an event in London a number of years ago, about 900 people in the audience. I asked all 900, I started with my presentation by saying, how many of you are here hoping to, you know, maybe just possibly sell something? 900 people raised their hands. I mean, the entire room. I said, great, how many of you are here hoping to, you know, maybe just possibly buy something? No one raised their hand. Not one single person. This is what I call the networking disconnect. People show up at networking events wanting to sell, but nobody's there to buy. If that's why you're there, is to just sell, then you're not going to do very well in networking.
And that transcends continents. I mean, what I've discovered, and doing my research on where BNI is, I thought it was just like a Western thing, or something that would be in Australia and a bit of Europe. And I mean, you've got chapters in Japan and China, and the level of respect requirement and giving value in those Eastern countries, I mean, is huge. And it's so interesting that BNI's been able to transcend the same advice and the same curriculum into those countries. Have you found that the process stays the same, or has it changed?
They are different. There are cultural differences. For example, in Japan, they have what's called the maishi ritual. You have a business card, you hold it with both edges, you bow, you hand it, you accept the card, and people go, well, how could you possibly, because in America, business card, hey, here's my card, and you just kind of toss it. Completely different. So how could it work in Western cultures and Eastern cultures like that? It's easy. We're not passing rocks to each other. We're passing business cards. Yeah. So again, we always look at dissimilarities. What are the similarities? We all pass business cards. Is it different? Yeah, but we're still passing business cards. And so what BNI has tried to do is to take the similarities and put it in a timed repetition process with some structure and system. You have to have structure, and there has to be, oh my goodness, rules. There has to be rules. Hockey without rules would be boxing on ice. Right?
It sticks.
It was sticks, that's right. And so you have to have rules. So we have systems, we have rules, we get together regularly, we have a process. You can transcend those cultural differences like passing a card pretty easily.
It's funny when you say that. So I talk about this cultural, I've got a client that helps executives be successful in China. And it's funny, I did a keynote presentation in Thailand. It was all people from Asia. And I'd spoken about it for years. Yeah. But for the first time I experienced the level of detail, people, the bowing, the handing the card, the flipping over the card to make sure that, and the pulling out of the card case.
And commenting on it. Almost always they comment on the card. That's important, yeah. And a lot of, particularly North Americans, will write on, it's very common to write on the back of a card. Don't do that. Do not do that in China or Asia. That's bad form. Even if you ask, they'll say okay, but they don't mean it. It's impolite.
Well, the other thing that I've noticed here is that people will go to networking events and they'll collect 30 cards and they'll go home and they'll be like, who was that person? Yeah. Where in China, it's impossible, because when you get everybody's card, you have to spend time appreciating it, and you lock the name and the detail with the person, and it makes such a difference.
It does.
So it's interesting that BNI has managed to cross the chasm to some of those cultural divides, but created a solid structure. Yeah. And going back to the concept of structure, because you're an introvert, and it was funny when I was researching you, I only invite introverts on the show, and I was like, I really want Ivan to be on the show because you endorsed my book, which I really appreciate, and I wanted to have you on the show. And I said, but I can't have him on the show because he's an extrovert. Clearly he's an extrovert. So I typed in your name and the word introvert, and the first blog post that came up was, oh my God, I'm an introvert. And it's such a cool story. So I'd love it if you would share that with us.
Totally true story. Probably 6-7 years ago, I was at home with my wife, and our kids were at some school event, a practice, so we didn't have to be there, and we didn't have the kids there, and it was like, oh man, this is what it's going to be like when we're empty nesters. It's wonderful, and we're having this great conversation. I don't even remember what it was about, but I said something to my wife where I was like, oh, you know me, honey, I'm such an extrovert, and she looked at me, she's like, no, you're not. I'm like, what do you mean, no, I'm not? Of course I'm an extrovert. I run the world's largest networking organization. I'm an extrovert. She's like, okay, if that's what you believe, that's fine. I'm like, what do you mean if that's what you believe? I'm a keynote speaker, an author. I have to be an extrovert. She's like, whatever you say, honey. I'm like, don't give me this whatever you say. I mean, what's going on? I'm an extrovert. She's, look, I'm reading a book now, she said, called The Introvert and Extrovert in Love. And started going through this list. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's like me. All right, that's like me. All right, that's a little bit like me, but I am not an introvert. How can I run this network and be an introvert? Then she hit one that was just, boy, it hit home. She said, introverts recharge their batteries by being alone or being with loved ones, family, whatever, but not out. Wow, that hit home with me because she loves going out. She's a total extrovert. I need to recharge my batteries alone at home. And so, but I'm annoyed now. So I go into my office at home and I get on Google and I find a test to take to show her that she's wrong. And so I take this test on introvert, extrovert, and it says, congratulations, Ivan Misner, you are an introvert who is a situational extrovert. If you're talking about a topic that you love, or if you're with people that you're close to, you come across as an extrovert. Otherwise, you are an introvert. Now go apologize to your wife. Okay, didn't say that, but I did. So yeah, I was a little surprised. But what was amazing was I started thinking about the network that I created. And I realized that I had created a network really for introverts without even consciously thinking about it. I could have created a network that was a big party, a mixer, lots of people getting together and mingling, but I'm uncomfortable with that. As a matter of fact, when I go to even BNI events, I ask someone to walk me around and introduce me to people because I feel uncomfortable just walking up to a stranger. It's all about building relationships, a small group of people, 40, 50 people usually in a room. And so it's about going deep and building relationships. It's not about a party. And I thought, oh my goodness, BNI really is perfect for introverts, and I had never considered that.
That's amazing. And I think one of the really cool things about that is that if you're an extrovert, you probably wouldn't have created BNI.
No.
So I think that a lot of people will see their introverted nature as a disadvantage.
Yes.
They see it as something that gets in their way of success.
Yes.
It sounds like to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like to me that introversion was actually one of the things that was critical to the success factors that you've had in business and in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, and I have said this before I came to the realization that I was an introvert, but I believe introverts and extroverts can be good at networking, but they have a whole different set of problems. Extroverts, they love meeting people. So everyone assumes because they love meeting people, they got to be great at networking. The problem with extroverts is that they love meeting people. They have no problem walking up and introducing themselves. And what's their favorite topic of discussion? Themselves. So they're great at meeting people and they're great at talking about themselves. But what I learned many years ago, and I've said this for decades, is that a good networker has 2 ears and 1 mouth and should use them both proportionately. You should be listening more than you're talking. It's almost like a great interviewer. You're asking me questions, you're allowing me to elaborate. Well, introverts are great at that. Introverts are great at asking questions and getting people to talk. Extroverts, not so much. So extroverts have to learn how to shut up and listen and ask appropriate questions. That comes natural to introverts. The problem with introverts is they have a hard time meeting people. So they need to work on how to meet people, and then they're really good at the conversation. Both have a strength, both have a weakness, and both can be successful if they do it right.
Thank you so much